Hi, it's Alabama Annie with another episode of Stories and Songs for you. Haunted houses. Those old abandoned places in every small town and big city that people think are haunted. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. This one was haunted. It's called the Tompkins House. The old house sat beside what used to be a well traveled thoroughfare, but the last few years had seen a decrease in traffic on that street, and a car rarely, if ever, pulled up the long drive to the house. It was no surprise to the neighbors when a for sale sign went up in the front yard. After all, it had been abandoned since Mr. Tompkins had died 5 years before, at the age of 97. A grumpy old man with a bad temper who lived there alone since his wife had passed, the last of his line with no heirs to leave it to save a great niece he'd barely known. And so it was that Catherine Parker came to the old house to spend some time going through his things. She arrived one rainy evening and settled in. She found that she had no interest whatsoever in most of his possessions but a few photographs and some jewelry which had belonged to his wife. The thought of keeping the place had crossed her mind until she'd been there a while and found no charm whatsoever in the peeling paint, the cracked window panes, and the antiquated furnishings, and she had not slept well during her visit. She kept hearing footsteps at night, and once she awoke to hear someone calling her name. She also felt as though she were being watched as she went about the task of going through her great uncle's things, and Catherine made up her mind that she would sell the place. So she contacted a local realtor who came right out to look the place over. My, it's been a long time since I was in this house, the woman told her. I came here as a girl with my mother to visit Mrs. Tompkins. And Mrs. Tompkins never wanted to spend any time here alone. She was always frightened of things here, saying she heard voices and footsteps on the floor. Hazel Klein agreed to list the house for her, knowing all too well that the old house did have that reputation of being haunted. She admitted she was amazed the Tompkins place hadn't sold years before, because she said Mr. Tompkins had needed to be in a home, that he had not fared well alone there in the house. She suggested to Catherine that they hire a local moving and cleaning company to come and dispose of all the furnishings Catherine didn't want and the personal belongings, and to give the place a good going over and cleaning, and Catherine agreed. She signed the contract, loaded her bags back into her car, and drove away home. The old house was cleared of its belongings and cleaned, and Hazel had a few repairs done as well to spruce the place up. When all of the work was done, she listed the house. She drove a stake in the front yard with a for sale sign on it and waited. She waited and waited. She waited all winter, but there were no takers, not even an inquiry as to whether or not the house was for lease or rent as well. And she knew that half the town believed the place to be haunted anyway. She knew how people could be. But an opportunity came in the spring when sadly the pastor of the only church in town passed away suddenly, and they found themselves in need of a new one. And it was on a sunny April morning that the new pastor and his young family met her at the house. Michael Eaton had been hired to take Reverend Payne's place, and after looking the old house over, the church committee agreed to purchase it sight unseen to serve as a parsonage, and the family moved right in. But they didn't stay long. At night, the family caught glimpses of someone hurrying along the hall and hearing footsteps on the stairs, and sometimes the children would wake up crying. They would tell their parents about a creepy old man dressed all in black who would come into their room and yank the covers off the bed. Doors would open and close of their own accord, and the family dog growled and barked continually, chasing something around the house that they couldn't see. The final straw came one rainy night as the family was pulling into the driveway and saw the headlights of their car shining on the house, and in the headlights they saw the dark figure of the man standing in a frame of an open upstairs window. The family made up their mind that very night never to set foot in the house again. and went to sleep in the church instead. Next day, a moving van came for their things and took them to a cozy little cottage they'd found at the edge of town. And for the next 30 years, the old house sat empty again. Then finally, a company came to town and purchased the 6 houses and acreage on that block to build a shopping center, and tore all of them down and began construction, and the center was open in no time for shopping. But it wasn't long until the employees of one of the stores began to tell stories about seeing the stooped figure of an old man dressed in black who frightened the employees. His heavy footfalls would rattle the display windows, and he slammed the doors every day and had taken to pinching shoppers when they were in the dressing rooms. Several of the people who worked there had heard stories about the old house and understood that it had been considered to be haunted. It didn't surprise them that Mr. Tompkins was there. 20 years later, that shopping center was razed, and a large vacant area became a city park. And that seemed to suit Mr. Tompkins just fine. It was a very peaceful place to spend the afternoon. So there we have the story of the Tompkins house. And here's a brief little tune to go along with it. It's called I'm a Ghost. I'm a ghost, baby. I'm a very, very old soul. I'm a ghost, baby. I'm a very, very old soul. You hear my footsteps, and I'm walking through your door. Call my name, I won't trouble you no more. I'm a ghost, baby. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Stories and Songs. I'll be back with more later.